So I get the kickoff here about strategy and work on our strategy and roadmap. But first of all, just welcome to Boston. Lucky, weather's amazing. I've had the good fortune of working at IDBS for over 25 years, and our office was just around the corner originally on Summer Street. And I remember the days looking out from the 5th floor at the seaport. We could see all the way to the sea. And now every time I come back to Boston, I am astounded at the development and how fast things are growing. But it's a beautiful city, and welcome. So, kickoff. Just first of all, this is a safe harbor statement. I'm going to give you the roadmap. There's some proprietary information here. We'd really appreciate this. You treat it with confidentiality. Don't take any pictures. Don't disseminate this more widely. But that would be really appreciated by us. So, I'm going to start and just talk broad thematically. You know, we've been in this industry for a long time. I've recently reconnected with Chris. My gosh. I remember Chris from my first days here on ActivityBase, and we've gone through a long evolution. I was lucky enough to be part of the team that launched the workbook, and that product line has matured and advanced, and we now refer to it as Polar. And there's going to be some themes that I'm going to talk about today. One of them is about workflow. At the end of the day, the most basic thing that we do is we provide infrastructure for you to run your business in an R&D lab. But hopefully we're doing that in such a way that we're generating context-rich, actionable data. And that's the story today. Everybody's talking about the value of data and what we want to do with it. So there's going to be a really strong theme here about AI. Not just today. If you guys are lucky enough to go to BioIT, you're probably going to hear the same thing. I bet you 95% of the talks have a sprinkling of AI in them. But we're also going to talk about workflow, and we're going to talk about our core platform and where we're going with that. So it's not all just about AI. But I mentioned it, so let's talk about it. You know, we're all in something just tremendous. You know, I'm lucky enough to have been around and seen all of these great whales come along. Anybody remember blockchain? How much money did you spend on blockchain? Did you invest heavily in that, guys? Molecular modeling, things like that. But this is, I really truly believe, the real deal. We're in an age now where the power of data is being leveraged in ways that were unfathomable a few years ago. And if we look at what we're all trying to get out of that, I even used it to prepare some of the slides. Everybody should be thinking about this. How can I leverage this in my day-to-day life? So key points here to think about. The most obvious thing, if you're designing molecules, everybody's interested in trying to move away from heavy, expensive wet lab work and try to move things in silico. But to do that, we really need validated models. We need trustworthy real-world data. So bridging the gap between wet and dry lab is a real imperative here as we start to navigate the future. We're all focused on our data ecosystems. You have your proprietary data, you're generating it all the time, but you're probably now ingesting data from CROs, partners, academia, or even the public domain to synthesize a coherent data set for you to make powerful decisions from. And we can see this happening. We talk about human in the loop, but I bet you almost all of your researchers are leveraging some of these new tools to do hypothesis testing, to make that initial query, that search, to start the thought process and the genesis of a new idea. What do I do next in the lab? This kind of synthesis of information and the power at which we have at our fingertips is going to be the de rigueur norm. I mean, I see it in our day-to-day life, whether we're doing it in sales, marketing, competitive analysis, but in the research lab, even in the development lab, the ability to synthesize all this stuff at your fingertips in seconds is just tremendous. So we're all in a race to get there, no doubt. And then finally, you know, this will have, no doubt, material impact on our businesses. How that transforms and plays out is to be seen, but there is no doubt that we are looking at how this drives things forward, whether it's more efficiency, faster time to innovation, or just simply better ideas and better outcomes. So, very powerful business justifications for why we're all talking about AI today. But the important thing is AI without context is just baloney. First generations of LLMs, everybody talked about hallucinations and how you got ridiculous answers, things that weren't true. But what we know in the lab is that we've always had a data problem. Always. We generate vast amounts of data and just sits there unused in our servers, in our data warehouses. And the problem is that the individual scientist can generate reams and reams of data, but to make sense of it, you have to connect so many dots. The provenance of the molecule, the hypothesis behind the experiment, the preparation of reagents, materials, the conditions on the instrument. None of these things reside in a single source. Bringing it all together is what makes science happen. And it's always been a problem in our industry to connect the dots. And now with AI and our doorsteps, it's front and center as the challenge of the decade. So, challenges here. Provenance. In our industry, traceability is king. Where did this data point come from? What was the progenitor of it? What is it connected to? Knowing that genealogy is critical in terms of how we build our models to make sense and get answers. Semantic continuity. You guys all love this. We've been talking about ontologies for decades and trying to connect the dots by making sure everybody talks the same language. We have no industry standards. But this is critical. What one vendor calls a parameter on their instrument, it can be completely different from another vendor. What you get from a source system or a sponsor or a vendor may be identified differently. We have to use the same language, and that burden is shifted onto you, the consumer of that data, to create that semantic continuity. Regulatory coherence. Now, whether you're in research or in some sort of regulated part of the downstream process, being friendly to your regulatory agencies is critical. And we don't know where this is going, but I'll tell you what, the regulatory agencies are not the ones who are holding us back right now. They're leaning hard into this. They're expecting us to lean forward too. But creating that coherence in terms of regulatory continuity is going to be important. And then finally, machine interoperability. We know where this is going. It's not just about having the human in the loop or the human on the loop. Ultimately, these tools are going to be able to make decisions on their own. And being able to make those systems interoperable, not just the data, but the systems interoperable with machines will be paramount to being successful. All right, some principles to talk about and think about today, just to kind of get the juices flowing. I'm going to pivot on to what we do. And first of all, just a reminder. Our core platform today, Polar, has got a lot in its wheelhouse. You know, I don't know what we call these things anymore. We used to call them ELNs. Some people have things, they talk about LIMS, registration systems. There's all kinds of acronyms. But at the end of the day, platforms like this do a lot. And I just kind of wanted to remind everybody, when we're talking about our current platform, the kinds of capabilities we have. Yes, of course, there is a paper replacement electronic lab notebook in there. But many of you also use our proprietary data processing tool called Advance. Looks a little bit like a spreadsheet, but it's a relational data model, very powerful. It's connected to instruments, so you can synthesize data, bring it in, do complicated algorithms and calculations. We got embedded chemistry synthesis tools. We have an inventory module. Not everybody uses that. We're not trying to sell you just a stock management tool, but when paired with a productivity workforce tool, you start to create the connections that are really necessary to get lab connectivity understood. If you're tracking your raw materials, your reagents, your buffers, their provenance, their dilution steps, their ingredients, and you're assigning them to experiments, you create a genealogical map that says exactly what happened in the lab. It's a very powerful tool when put together. We have a requesting tool. Just recently, we just had a recent update of our request module. Requesting allows the operators who synthesize materials to collaborate with those who do the testing. Simple as that. Those testing labs, they have huge queues of work behind them. They want to get a lot of requests in. They want to put a shop front up so they can collaborate. And that's exactly what Request helps you with. There's some other things, though, that you may or may not be aware of, but we did release last year something called Polar Control. This is an extension of our data backbone, and it creates the infrastructure for you to manage process parameters, CVPs, CQAs, and to create that knowledge store associated with the evolution of a process. So if you're in process development, and you're iterating to try to optimize a process, we can manage that content, create the genealogy, and by the way, by the time you get to the end of your development process, you have a coherent data set that's getting ready for your tech transfer process. And then finally, you know, I've got down here integrations. We've always had integrations to the lab benchtop, to external files, to systems like LIMS. But we've done a lot in the last few years to really up this to a cloud-native platform that's GXP compliant, using tools with our partners like AWS. And we're building a framework now for compliant data ingestion into our data backbone with full traceability and provenance, semantic continuity. So where are we going with this platform? Obviously, it's very powerful as it today. I like to use this metaphor, sorry, jumping ahead, this metaphor of the lab loop. All of you are doing this loop on scale. Scientists every day go into the lab, and they need to plan experiments. They want to look at their historical data, the results from the last few experiments, design the next best experiment. They need to integrate with systems, collating samples information, pulling instrument data in, and they execute work. And they probably have a very tactical output, analyzed as chromatograms and give a direct answer, but that data becomes foundational to a whole series of other decisions when you combine the work of many labs to get a higher level question answered. And that's where we get to the next problem I talked about just in my previous slide. How do we connect the dots? How do we create a coherent data set with the provenance, the semantic continuity? That amalgamation, that alignment is the real tough challenge that we're all wrestling with. And no single vendor provides the universal system. And then finally, if you've done your job, you get higher level value. We contribute to all elements of that wheel. We don't do it all. You've got a pretty complicated data ecosystem and set of instruments on your own. But there's where we are today. But where do we see the future going for us? Well, 3 pillars of our investment strategy. One is we need to lean hard in on a data foundation that is AI ready. That means all those things that I talked about are baked into what we do. We're building a data layer on top of our systems that bring those 4 pillars together to provide you AI-ready, actionable data. And we're going to showcase some of that today with tools that show you how you can interact with that and search on top of that. Now, I'm not trying to be the data lake or data warehouse to rule them all. I'm certainly not trying to replace your data infrastructure. But the things that we do, the data we generate in-house, has to follow those principles for you to find action and quality from it. Next pillar, workflow. At the end of the day, all of us are data companies, but IDBS provides infrastructure for you to execute work. Some of that is very simple, paper replacement, throw in unstructured data. But a lot of you use our advanced tools, our inventory modules, requesting to create pretty sophisticated human-in-the-loop workflows every day. And we will acknowledge that that technology has run a long course. The advanced spreadsheet is fantastic at what it does. But right now, we're at a juncture where we need to operate at scale. We can't afford to spend the time building these workflows in a human-centric way, extensively validating them. It takes 6 months for some of these more sophisticated things to be built. We need to find a way to lean in, modularize it, make it programmatic, and let AI help us assemble workflows at scale. And that's exactly what we're investing in today. And then finally, if we bring those 2 pillars together, a solid AI foundation built on semantic enriched data with context that we can drill into, and a programmatic workflow engine, we believe that we have agents on the horizon that will help you assemble better quality experiments automatically, validate them, do the QA, and help with summarization. Agentic workflow. And that's where we want to go to in the next few years. All right, 3 pillars of my investment strategy that I want to share with you. One is foundations. And when I say foundations, we want to just assure you, you've made big investments in our platform today. We are not walking away from that. In fact, last quarter, we did a major update to the inventory module. This quarter, we're working on new updates to the the request module that you'll see. And going forward, you're going to hear incrementally, we're continuing to invest in the core technology for you to get continued benefit from it. Second piece, how do we build that data foundation to help drive faster time to insight? That's the name of the game, getting data in, structuring it with quality, and getting it out. And the third pillar is that automation framework I talked about. How do we remove the over-reliance on a spreadsheet technology to something that's more modular, programmatic, that can be driven by AI? So I think today you're going to hear at least some of our narrative from other speakers around our story on AI and certainly our modular workflow engine. Let's take a little deeper dive. So first, that foundations piece. I'm just going to call out a few things that we're doing that I think are notable. So one thing I just mentioned is the requesting module. We partnered with a few of our customers, which are heavy users of request, notably one of them being CSL. And we looked at how we could really improve the user experience there to really move things at scale. So there's been a lot of real thought went into it, and a new release of the requesting module allows how you take requests from multiple people that might be wanting to be split. Someone gives you a request that you want to allocate over 15 work cycles, maybe 3 different operators, or vice versa. You've got lots of little requests and you want to pool them. Splitting, pooling, a lot of this stuff is down in the weeds, but it really makes the engine much more powerful to operate at scale. So those of you who are using requests, I think you're going to really love some of the features that we've just introduced into the requesting features. Ownership and governance of the advanced spreadsheet. So I mentioned, mea culpa, building one of these workflows based around the advanced spreadsheet is a time-consuming endeavor. You got to gather requirements, you got to document them, you got to build the worksheets themselves, you probably got to write test scripts for them, you got to then document that. You have probably in a production, you have a testing environment that you set it all up in, then you got to move it to a production environment, you got to validate it again. When we actually sat down with the heavy users that said, what is one of the biggest bits of muda and effort that goes into that spreadsheet technology? It is that life cycle. Building, testing, and deploying the spreadsheets. One of the first things they ask for is to help us make that process simpler. So as I mentioned, if you are building one of these spreadsheets, like anything, you got to document your code. Really time consuming. Everything I put into that little piece of code has to be written somewhere to form a test script. And then if I make changes, how do I know where those changes are? How do I document those changes? How can I do diff and comparison? Well, the things that we have released last quarter and we'll be releasing an iteration on this quarter is a system by which you automatically generate the documentation for everything you've done. It'll be represented in both a PDF format, so you can archive it, but it also has a machine operable JSON layer. This quarter, we're creating a diff tool that allows you to say, hey, I've made some changes. Help show what I've changed between the 2 objects so I can focus my testing. Those 2 simple assets can create huge time savings in your life cycle for test and deploy. Pretty excited about that. Some things that we're working on this quarter, coming out later this year, again, in partnership with our customers, heavy users of inventory, what are some of the things they'd like to see in the inventory product? And one of them is just a lot more tracking of the usage of my materials. It's kind of interesting, I remember early in the cycle, a lot of people, inventory is just a pain in the butt, Somebody's got to type in and ascension all these things when they come in the lab. Every time I use them, I got to decrement something. Can you just make this a lot easier so that take away the muda? I don't want to do all that. So we're doing a lot now to help automate so that it's really easy for you to do those transitions. As you run a workflow, you do the decrementing and you get much more clear level of quantity tracking and what's available on the shelf in your lab. Smarter save and update handling. One of the consequences of our technology in its dating is some of the architectural considerations that went into the spreadsheet in the early days. We've been doing a lot to modernize that platform. As I said, we're not walking away from it. Moving this into a true cloud native framework that allows concurrent usage of the spreadsheets, smarter saves, less redundancy. We call that multi-part architecture. It's the way that we're spinning up instances for your spreadsheet users to use the system. It provides a lot more resilience in the system, fault tolerance, and improves the reliability of the system. A lot of work has gone into that, but it has been some of the most important things that we've been asked to address in this life cycle. SQL Data Gateway is a similar thing. A bit of an older technology requiring VPN access. We're getting rid of that. Again, moving to a true cloud native structure with Amazon Greengrass. We're allowing SQL direct querying of our systems from the cloud without requiring a VPN configuration. Little things, huge quality of life. And then finally, there's a whole slew of things coming down the pipe for both our PIMS product and our Polar Control product in terms of how we leverage process data to give you an overall view on process lifecycle. We call it unified manufacturing analytics. So pay attention to this space. What I'm happily sharing with you, though, is we're not forgetting the core technology. Even though I got really excited about what I want to share with you next, all of the capabilities we have today, we are investing in, mainly focused on customer requests coming from you to improve quality of life, and getting more value from the investments you have. Now let's talk about integration and driving workflows faster. One of the things that we released recently and I touched upon is a new connectivity layer. We've had connectivity for years, but a lot of it has been point to point. It goes directly to our spreadsheet servers and our spreadsheet users. And we can connect to balances, we can connect to SQL servers, we can connect to LIMS, sure. But it's all gone in a point-to-point fashion to our spreadsheet servers. What we've created in partnership with Amazon is a framework for data ingestion, leveraging remote agents through Amazon Greengrass. We stream that in a compliant fashion to a landing place using Amazon S3, and then we do a data transformation using Databricks to pipe that data to sources inside our system. One of the great things about this is, well, first of all, it's GXP compliant. It makes validation of some of these processes much easier. 2, it can handle things at scale. Previously, we streamed things to our spreadsheet server. You're constrained by what the spreadsheet can do. You're having to process everything in the spreadsheet. Now, with server-side connectivity, all that data comes into onto our infrastructure in the cloud, where we can do processing at scale and can remove the MUDA, simplify your spreadsheets, make them more performant, and produce a lot less work on them. When we launched that last year, the first connector we launched that with was a unicorn connector. We have in the pipeline some more connectors this year, one of them being around Mosaic, another one around a SQL Server. But this is a framework that we intend to continue to extend, and in particular, we want to extend it with you. There's obviously many things we could do with this, but identifying partners who want to prioritize workflows and instruments that they want to extend this library out with is one of our priorities. Looking forward, we're looking at how we can really speed the life cycle up of developing these connectors. Right now, I'd say that when we are benchmarking what connectors that we have in pipeline, they're taking us about 6 weeks. But we're looking at some agentic tools to help automate the coding to really speed up connector lifecycle development. And our intent is to provide as much infrastructure as we can inside our platform so you don't feel the need to go to a third-party vendor and basically have too many cooks in the kitchen. So that's a really important part of our foundation. Next, you're going to hear from Nick later about some of the work we're doing on the data foundation for AI. Not just some of the data modeling, but some early interfaces that will show how we can leverage chatbot interfaces to mine both structured and unstructured data. And this includes all of your legacy data that may be unstructured in the system today to get value from it. Finding records and vastly improving the search interface with natural language syntax and processing. No longer are you going to have to write cheesy text-based searches that have low fidelity or relevance scores. The interface now is just showing amazing interaction to mine that data and summarize things. And again, both unstructured and structured data. Unstructured data is kind of not just low-hanging fruit, but many of you have, terabytes of data sat in there that's unstructured. Getting value out of that today is of paramount importance to us. So Nick will show some of that later today, but it's a really exciting piece of technology. Going forward, how do we see that being leveraged? Well, as we move from just simple documents and some of the things we've done in the spreadsheet, there's all kinds of rich data that we want to connect up and create a rich semantic layer that you can't simply replicate from an outside agent. The connectivity would have to be inferred by you. And that means going into things such as the requesting system, the inventory module, and the other rich data sets that we have to give higher fidelity, more traceability, and better reporting. On top of that, Nick's team is looking at how we apply more specific endpoint purpose agents. You can not only help design a better bioreactor experiment, but you could also reduce the burden, for example, on quality assurance and quality checking downstream with proprietary agents. It all needs to be built on a solid AI foundation, though, that we're working on today. And then finally, one of the things that we have in flight today, and I think, again, Nick is going to show you, I've got this down as not next, but later. We might bring that up in the life cycle. We'll see how fast we move on it. But we're already working with MCP-style interfaces so that you don't just have to use our inherent agent to do searching, our own interface, but you can extract that data and have it driven through your own LLMs and your own interfaces. And I think we have some partners in the room that are also very interested in how we expand that MCP layer to make it more actionable. All right. And then finally, the theme I want to talk about is AI-enabled next-gen workflow. That is really around how we go beyond the spreadsheet. And this is what Nick will also share with you. First of all, it's modular workflow, and he's going to show you how the interfaces is evolving beyond the spreadsheet, beyond the notebook paradigm, to how we can create reusable components, assembled quickly, and used with a human operator, human in the loop. But all of those are being built with a programmatic interface at the bottom that will be driven by AI. Right now, it's going to be showing, I think, how it can be used in a collaborative fashion, removing some of the burden of multi-user editing and things like that. But as we go forward, Nick's vision is really about how this can be generating these workflows automatically, pre-populating them with optimized experimental parameters. And then finally, I just touched upon how agents could be applied to that to do specific tasks in the life cycle. Okay. So, finally, I'll summarize here. I think all of you are probably here at the conference to look at how you move at pace in this pretty fast-moving world. Moving at pace means, how we eliminate these data silos. You want to take action with your data. You're going to have to connect the dots from research through CMC all the way into tech transfer. It's not just that we've had this problem for years. The tools that we're talking about will make it easier, I think, in terms of the way they can start creating those semantic layers for us, annotating the data, and helping build these data foundations in a coherent way. Secondly, we're all waiting with bated breath to watch the first adopters and how they go through the regulatory life cycle. How we get these drugs to market, what sort of burdens and hurdles the regulatory agents are going to put in front of us, and what will be the evolving standards. But this is critical. We all are excited by the technology. We're all scared of the regulatory complications and implications. But this is something you must pay attention to. We can't be behind the window. One of the things that gets me really excited is how these tools can be used to leverage institutional knowledge. All that stuff that's in our systems today, it's almost unactionable. I mean, I've heard terrible quotes. I won't even say them out loud about what a lot of ELN systems can be referred to, but people put stuff in and they don't get it out. These tools offer a way to preserve that institutional knowledge for posterity's sake. Data doesn't have to be lost. It doesn't have to be unactionable. But it is a way, as we move and change through the workforce, mergers, acquisitions, to really help preserve institutional knowledge. Provenance and making sure that we can follow the thread all the way through is always going to be a challenge. And certainly, I'm really excited, particularly at the late end of it. We talk about tech transfer. Tech transfer is the biggest challenge with tech transfer is just finding all the data, packaging it up, handing it off to the next business unit, and when they ask a question, being able to follow this back and say, why did you decide that? Where was the continuity and the thread? It's kind of beyond the wit of a human brain to put all those connections together, but with things like AI and a proper data layer, that business continuity and chasing the thread all the way to the point of a decision is going to be a tremendous advantage that we have going forward. And then finally, I'm sure you're all doing it now, but we need to operationalize these tools. We need to be comfortable with them in our day-to-day life. And to be honest, if I was a young person coming into this industry, this is a moment where you have to adapt or die. This will be the standards going forward. Lean in, folks. Embrace this stuff. You can get some operational gains today. I'm not promising you that all of your troubles will go away. You're not going to generate AI slop. You're not going to have different types of work coming down your path. But I hope everybody is encouraged in embracing this and leaning in hard. All right, with that, I'll take a few questions and open the floor.
If you have a question, please raise your hand, and somebody with a handheld mic will come to you so we can all hear. Any questions for Scott?
No questions?
No questions. Well, I think you've explained it. Oh, hang on. Sam's got a question. Just wait for your hand.
Of all the topics on the screen currently, which one would you say our customers should maybe lean towards caution the most, and which one should they lean towards the most?
Lean toward caution. Well, I think everything when you say AI, there's a trepidation everybody's a bit nervous about. I mean, no one here is talking about removing people from the loop and fully automating it with agentic agents. We're still in a learning phase. But I think most people are appreciative of that. I would say that the thing that most people are probably thinking long and hard about is the data itself and the provenance of the data. Without a solid data foundation, without building that foundation of your house, the rest of it comes apart. We have a question over here.
My question's a little, I don't know. I want to, because I haven't studied it, so I'd like to just explain all these companies that are on this poster, how are they all related? They don't just talk about partnering with the US, just said that in here.
Sure. I'm happy to do a bit of a pitch. So obviously AWS, hopefully everyone knows who Amazon Web Services are. They're part of our foundational technology, our cloud infrastructure provided by AWS. Zifo are a services partner. They operate globally. They have a heavy presence I know in North America, in Europe. They deliver a lot of our projects and services, as do Atune and Transgenics. So they're here today as sponsors. I think they will have some booths outside where you can learn a little bit more about them. But we work in lockstep with them to deliver projects. Yes, sir.
Very nice. So it's great to hear about these ideas that can accelerate this kind of software development, and most importantly, the final workflow is deliverable to you. And speaking from the lab research side, the pharmaceutical side of the business, what, if you were to pick one thing that we could do as an industry that would align to this vision of faster tool development, better data, quicker decision making, good lineage, what would that be?
Well, pick the right vendors to start with. It's a great question. I mean, you can tell I've been around the block for a long time. We've always, I think, as I look over the history of trying to do better data provenance, we've gone through a lot of life cycles of ontology management, trying to get standards in our industry, building the ultimate data warehouse to rule them all. We're in a new frontier land, right? I mean, there are some emerging standards, but how long has Allotrope been trying to make a crack at this? So I'm not holding out for standards to save our bacon. You should be building an ontology layer. But you've got lots of ontologies, both public and private, so there should be infrastructure there that you can shift and lift to give yourself a universal lexicon when you start mapping your data. Data warehouses, I think you need to talk to your partners here at companies like AWS. We are talking about large volumes of data at rest that can be repurposed and structured for endpoints going forward. And things like large language models are going to really help accelerate that data transformation. Trying to build data pipes by hand that says move A to B and put it into a data warehouse, those days are dead. So there is a lot of new technology that's come from outside our industry that we have to be prepared to embrace and look outside of ourselves to what the rest of the world's doing. Yeah.
So I suppose we really have to work across industries. Like I'm in company X, somebody else is in company Y. The ideal, I suppose, if we had a forum in which we could align, like I think there is a meeting called IQ, where people align across the industry on standards. I don't know if there's one in this area.
Well, as I mentioned, Allotrope's a really well-known consortium that built a data model. You have the Bioforum consortium. So there are industry consortiums that typically fit into parts of the life cycle. That you can attend and get a lot of inspiration from other vendors, like other companies like yourself who are operating in that space, but also get involved in projects that bring together some of these standards. Allotrope was an example of that. They created a foundation. They had sponsors. They had vendors in the mix to create a standard. So it's coming, but it's coming. Those things are slow. They're very slow. The world is moving a lot faster right now. So waiting for those, maybe behind. I got 2 minutes. Any more questions? Good questions, though.
One more
Stephen.
question over here. Or any more?
Thank you. I'm Stephen from Florida. Hi, thanks for the presentation. I've just got a question. Now you're embracing AI, well, most people are as well. Have you building on top of your platform? Have you seen that you might need to rebuild your platform to be more efficient?
That's making me sweat. Yeah. The pace at which this technology is moving, I'd say it's slowing us down with a little bit of analysis paralysis. Do you go with vendor A, B, and C? Do you invest in this technology? There is a bit of I won't say reluctance, but trepidation that you pick the right technology partners. So it's a really critical part of our decision-making process, and we have to be prepared to pivot. I'll give you a case in point. Sure, we could talk about the Databricks and the Amazons. Those are a little bit of safe bets, right? Stick with the crowd. Everybody uses Snowflake, Amazon, and Databricks. But when you start trying to pick your LLM vendor, you're going to go with Anthropic, you're going to go with OpenAI, you're going to go with a different. Things are moving so fast. So you really have to start thinking about your architecture and being ready to be plug and play and to decouple, recouple. But yeah, there's a little bit of a headache and a little bit of fear there, for sure, no doubt. But it's still, I'd rather be in this place than stagnation.